With TBC Anniversary coming right around the corner, everybody's excited about it. So Willie here made a video called TBC will not be the same game on an anniversary, so let's just take a look and dive right into it.
Three realms reach the end of the road, we will once again cross the dark portal on and over to the Burning Crusade, World of Warcraft's first.
And if you ask a lot of people, can't come soon enough, anniversary is terrible, give me TBC. And I just hope that everybody that's trying to rush through the TBC doesn't say the same thing about fuck TBC, let's go straight into Wrath of the Lich King Anniversary, can't wait for Wrath. I hope that's not what happens. I hope people actually enjoy TBC and actually love it and partake in it and enjoy the whole culture and vibe and world of TBC Anniversary.
Expansion and a whole separate alien world full of its own challenges and memories. It's a day a lot of people are looking forwards to for many reasons, be it the nostalgia, class changes, raids, or whatever else it may be. But
the day the gates opened the first time back in 2021 was amazing. This was beautiful. This was so much fun. This was iconic. I remember coming down the gate and it was jam-packed, it was laggy, and the servers were insane, the queue times were wild. It was just an obscene amount of people trying to bum rush through the content and get to the next level, the next step, the next batch of content. But it was iconic.
Second time around releasing TBC, at least in a classic capacity, is going to be a bit different from how it was the first time. It'll be different because the community will approach the game with so much more knowledge now, because of changes that Blizzard have made, and because we learned so much about TBC during our first run back in 2021. So today I wanted to talk about these differences in TBC Anniversary, and why it's going to be a bit of a new experience from how our first re-release of TBC was, in terms of classes, general gameplay changes, potential updates, and more. First, and a massive...
So before he dives into that, one thing I've saw with Anniversary versus 2019 is in 2019, people were treating World of Warcraft Classic as a continuation of vanilla. They were trying to enjoy it in a vanilla mindset and vanilla methodology. And don't get me wrong, people like apes clearing Molten Core and Blues and Greens and level 58 is one thing. But a huge portion of the player base was just having a good time. They were just playing, they were just casual and enjoying themselves. By Psalm, Solid, and Anniversary and all the other rerolls, Anniversary right out the gate was sweaty, elitist, fast-paced, everybody knew everything, best class, best spec, how to play, what to play, why you should do this, why you should do that. And it took some of the fun, some of the charm away from what made, 2019 so iconic, 2019 so fun. So when I consider that, I actually am kind of hopeful that the future for TBC Anniversary isn't as aggressively fast-paced, min-max, in, out, next, as Classic itself was, or Anniversary itself was.
Addition to TBC is the fact that Anniversary realms have dual specialization. This is available at level 40 and costs 50 gold, and is pretty obviously a huge quality of life change for all types of players. You can now be a PvP and get to have a spec for arena and then one for raid. When running a bunch of dungeons early on, you could flex between a bunch of different roles depending on your class and what you want to do. And of course, some classes can lock in a gold farm oriented spec to AoE, whilst also maintaining a raid focused spec too. Whatever you play, dual spec will be a great addition to TBC, and hopefully we see a few more people flexing to healer or tank, knowing they can just click a button and become their main spec once again. For TBC as well, there were a ton of learning points for each of the classes in the game compared to our first run of the expansion.
Dual spec is something I've talked about before as well. I don't understand anybody that says dual spec is bad, dual spec is terrible, dual spec removes the iconicness or whatever from the game. We've already removed that level of playing the game how it's meant to be played. Nobody played vanilla in the way we're playing today, so dual spec is not a far cry from that classic spirit, or the vanilla spirit as they want to call it. Because if we're sticking by the vanilla spirit or the classic spirit, half the shit we do in the game wouldn't count. So dual spec is one of the singular best additions to the game. It adds so much flavor, so much context, so much value that dual spec is hands down one of the singular best additions they've done to the game.
And I wanted to cover each class in the game, highlighting what may be different with today's modern knowledge. But first, a quick word from today's sponsor, Boot.dev. Boot.dev is a platform dedicated to teaching back-end web development from start to finish in Python, Go, SQL...
So I'm going to let Willie's ad play on in the background. go get a boot.dev thing with his link if you're watching this reaction and you want to learn the coding. There'll be a description to his link to his video in the description down below. But being realistic, I will say that TBC Anniversary has this weird thing against it, this weird context where it's either going to be an incredibly fun experience, or right from the get-go, everybody is going to just quit the game. It's going to start off really strong and then immediately fucking die. And I'm actually worried about that, because if TBC like plays the same way Anniversary did, it's not going to be a very popular game. If the whole meta point of TBC is to raid log as fast as humanly possible and kill the game into a state of just log in, raid, log out, TBC will drop players a lot faster than Anniversary did. And I'm actually worried about that. I hope, and I mean this, I genuinely hope that TBC doesn't go down the route of Anniversary. But Willie's ad is done now, so let's take a look at this.
If you choose the annual plan. Many thanks to boot.dev for the support on the channel. Let's get on back to WoW. Warriors were expected to be super average until tier 6, that's Mount Hyjal and Black Temple, because of the lack of available armor penetration on items. However, it was proven back in TBC Classic, even during tier 5 early on, they could already do very well. In fact, a lot of guilds pushing for speedrun times were still stacking warriors over the more traditionally good TBC DPS such as BM Hunter or Destruction Warlock. Saying that, warriors, or just melee in general, aren't as stackable in raids due to more mechanic heavy bosses that can occasionally punish unbalanced comps. Also, like any DPS in TBC, you're not just great by yourself, you need help to excel in the raid.
I will say this about warriors. I remember back in 2021, everybody said warrior meta was bad, all the warriors are going to re-roll. And then warrior stayed second, third, or fourth on all the charts, all the way until Sunwell. Warrior was never bad. Warrior was second best DPS or third best DPS, like even best DPS once the gear started kicking in. Warrior is just broken. It's incredibly strong, and anybody that says that Warrior is bad is wrong. The problem is you just can't bring 10 warriors. You can bring 3 or 4, heck you can even bring like 5, but you can't bring 17 warriors into TBC. That's the only major difference. Plus, there's also the Warglaive issue. Warriors do so well with it. Rogues are insane with it. But so are Fury Warriors. So all the rogues are going to be mad when they can't get Warglaives because they give it to the big dick Fury Warrior.
For example, improved Expose Armor, Wind Fury, Enhancement Shaman Totems, Unleash Rage for 10% attack power, a Survival Hunter for Expose Weakness, Feral for 5% bonus crit, and more. TBC is like building up your DPS to allow them to perform, which is why warriors will often appear to be really good when they're in a try-hard guild that's giving them everything they need, and be kind of average otherwise. Though once we do...
Yeah, like the Warglaives, and you need a comp built around it, but if you build the comp around it, they pump. But for a lot of casual mid-level guilds, you'll bring your 1 warrior, just so you have the things you need, and maybe even 2 warriors. Heck, I could even see 3 warriors for a lot of casual guilds, but not more than that at all. And I don't even know if most guilds will bring 3 warriors. There's so many other things and classes that add utility and damage and things to the raid team that I just see a lot of people, a lot of mid-level or lower guilds just not bothering with like the big dick pumper warriors and building comps around them.
Hit tier 6, and of course if you get glaives you turn into an absolute monster, but there's no guarantee you're gonna get them. Either way, the second time around in TBC, I think a lot more people are gonna be trying to stick with their warrior as a main, so there may be a bit more competition on those raid spots. For Paladin, the biggest change was no more unique faction seals. Both Horde and Alliance had a version of Seal of Blood and Seal of Vengeance. Vengeance ended up being more of a tank spec ability when you're gonna be actively tanking a single target for a prolonged period of time. Seal of Righteousness was better for building snap threat initially, but Vengeance was nice to throw up afterwards if you're going to be tanking that target for a while. Seal of Blood, or the Alliance version Seal of the Martyr, was the big one for Retribution DPS, and importantly it enabled seal twisting as a unique playstyle. This simply means you're changing from one seal to another as your melee attack lands, enabling you to benefit from both on-hit effects. When you combine this with Wind Fury, you can do absolutely crazy bursts in a single hit, and having played it, I can tell you it's
probably going to be a singular most raid teams. I would be surprised if most guilds even brought a ret. And they'll try, but like if you got your prop paladin and your holy pallies, you're not really going to get that many red paladins in a raid team. But red paladins really good once they get the ball rolling, right? But like, not really the biggest dick of DPS. So I expect a token red per raid team, if that.
Really satisfying to pull off. But I know seal twisting is a bit of an acquired playstyle. You're going to need a weak aura to track your swing timer, and you're going to have to get used to the flow of the gameplay, which will also be changed as you upgrade your weapon to ones with different speeds. Ideally you want a slow weapon. But if you do want to do damage on your ret, you kind of have to seal twist. This isn't really optional. If you don't twist, you'll be down at the bottom of the damage meter on every single fight. They may do a PTR or something of the likes for TBC where you could test out to see if this playstyle's for you if you've never tried it, or you could give it a go on Season of Discovery if you have a Paladin there. Either way, just know that both Paladins have both seals now, and if you're planning on playing ret DPS, seal twisting, kind of a big deal. Shaman are a class where they played out pretty much as we expected them to do. They're always going to be a free ticket to any raid in TBC, whether you're...
I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you want a guaranteed raid spot no matter what, you go Resto Shaman. You will never be looking for a guild or for a raid for longer than 2 minutes. You go Resto Shaman and you'll be snapped up instantly. You'll have your pick of the guilds too. From sweaty guilds to mid-level guilds to bad guilds to semi-hardcore guilds. Any guild you're looking for, you'll be able to find as a Resto Shaman. They are the singular most in-demand class. It's not even close. Now, Enhanced and Elemental Shaman will also always be in demand because of, you know, Bloodlust, Totems. They just add a lot of, just a lot to the game and to every raid team. So if you want to get a guaranteed raid team, it's Shaman. Resto Shaman by far. But I know a lot of people are averse to playing healers because, healing? I'm a DPS. I'm a warrior. Yeah, good luck waiting 30 minutes for a raid spot. If a pug even takes you. Shaman's the way to go, if I'm being real.
Pugging or you're part of a guild, this is just a great choice for a main. The big question here is, of course, will Blizzard make Bloodlust and Heroism raid-wide instead of just applying to your own group? And I think they will, you know. Yes, it will make Shamans a bit less in demand, but you're stacking them for more reasons than just Bloodlust. Your melee group always want an Enhance, your casters always want Elemental, and Restoration is a good healer and offers Mana Tide. It's just you'll go from, say, ideally 7 or so Shaman to about 4 or 5. That's still 1/5 of your raid on one class out of a possible 9. So yeah, this class is still going to be highly represented, don't worry about it.
Yeah, and that's also true. If they do, because they're going to do a bunch of changes to TBC. We saw on Anniversary they did changes. We saw on Mob Classic they did changes. They're going to do changes in TBC as well, and I absolutely see Heroism and Bloodlust becoming a raid-wide buff. One person pops it, everybody gets it. Which could honestly piss off a lot of people if somebody misclicks it early and fucks up everybody's Bloodlust and Heroism, because that's definitely going to happen too. I could 100% see that happening as well.
About that. One more thing about enhancement actually, and that is regarding totem twisting. This is simply dropping Wind Fury for the temporary weapon buff, swapping to Grace of Earth for the bonus agility buff, and then back to Wind Fury before that buff fades. The more tryhard your guild, the more you're going to be expected to do this, and I find it's a playstyle not everyone likes. On top of that, there's also weapon syncing, where you want 2 weapons of the same speed, and if they desync, you need to wait a moment and attack again. This is so you're getting the best uptime possible out of your flurry talents from crits. These 2 things may not be for everyone, so I just wanted to throw them in there for enhancement as well, and let you know that depending on how tryhard your guild is, you may be expected to do these. Going into TBC Classic, Hunter was expected to use the info.
And as the game has become sweatier and sweatier, I think even mid-level guilds are going to be expected to be trying to play better. I think a lot of people are going to expect you to not necessarily do everything perfectly, but try your best to keep all your shit going, right? Like, I don't expect in a mid-level guild that people will be kicking you or yelling at you for this, but I do expect guilds in general to just be playing at a higher level, trying more, trying to push harder, and attempting to play, just in general, that you attempt to play your class to the maximum ability you can, to the best of your personal ability and skill.
one button DPS rotation macro, but it turns out this macro didn't work so well in a classic setting and was a very poor alternative to just playing your class as intended. Hunter though was not an easy class to play well in TBC. In fact, for me it has to be the highest skill cap class in the game, and it is not even remotely close. Now of course you could just not really pay much attention, sit back and press steady shot and you do fine enough, but if you want a class to try hard on, to really push the limits on, it is absolutely Hunter. I even found online what is practically a thesis on Hunter DPS in TBC if you don't believe me.
Hunter's not necessarily the hardest to play well, but at the highest level you will have to be trying. That's the same for most classes. But this is part of what worries me about TBC, about Anniversary, about Classic in general. We're treating it like retail in the maximized ability to play the game and raid and do content. And it's a thing I've talked about before, but it just doesn't sound like Classic. And it's what it is. I'm not here to this is not what the video's about, right? But looking at this shit, min-max the absolute living shit out of TBC, out of Classic. And it's starting to become an expectation.
The difficulty was not clipping your auto-attack swing timer whilst also getting in as many steady shots as possible. The problem was, depending on your weapon's attack speed, you had to relearn this optimal rotation, and haste effects mid-fight would also change this rotation again, such as Haste Potion or Bloodlust. On top of that then there was melee weaving Hunter with Wind Fury, which to get the most out of has to be one of the most mechanically demanding specs in WoW ever. You're having to manage both your swing timers at the same time, boss movement, and
look at this damage Hunters are doing. 5,000 DPS, absolute insanity.
And haste effects. I know back at the end of TBC, people were using auto hotkey scripts on static bosses, so their character would perfectly step into melee, and then step out again and go back to range. So surprisingly, if you want a class which is hard to master, where skill levels will separate you from others, the answer in TBC is Hunter. Remember how people were looking at rogues pre-TBC? They were dooming on them super hard, saying they offered nothing unique to a raid, and they had bad DPS on top of that.
In regards to rogue, you don't necessarily need one rogue, but you always want at least one rogue. But they do an insane amount of DPS when played well to a high level. But people have this mentality of bad class, bad spec, I'm not bringing it. And so rogue got a lot of negative PR. And it suffered for it. Rogue truly and genuinely did suffer for the negative PR that it got.
In practice, they were okay in tier 4 and 5, and they started to get good in tier 6 even without glaives. Of course, if you do get glaives, they turn into something amazing, but just like Warrior, you can't count on that. If you get them, that's great, but most people won't. Really, there isn't too much else to be said for the rogue, but I will say the same thing as I said in 2021. Join a guild. Don't try and play this class in a pug life, it's just not going to be fun. At least you get dual spec so you can queue arena now though, that's something.
Yeah, rogues, warriors, not necessarily hunters or warlocks as much, but boomkin, a lot of those classes that can do well, but are reliant on a raid comp will truly, genuinely struggle to find a raid team when you're pugging. And it's not going to be fun for a lot of people just that are playing for fun and not min-maxing or meta chasing. For a lot of people that are just there for fun, you need to find a guild. This game is a community game. You need a community to make the game fun and enjoyable. And a lot of people just will not find a guild. They want a pug. That GDKP mindset, that SR mindset, it's smoother and funner for people until you actually have to find a raid team, and then it's not as smooth, not as fun.
In TBC, Druid became a class where raids wanted all of their specs available. Feral became the best main tank of the expansion, surpassing Warrior on single target. This was both from a survivability point of view, as they had a massive amount of armor and health, and their single target threat generation. And believe me, TBC is the threat expansion. If you thought threat mattered a lot in vanilla, well, we have more than about one relevant DPS spec now, which can challenge your tank for that threat lead. And depending what you're playing, if if you do a lot of damage, you can just overtake a tank, and there's not much they can do about it, to be honest. It's one of the skill issues which every DPS player, especially those on the higher DPS classes, have to deal with in TBC. The other druid specs were fine and they were valued in raids, but they were often just one-off specs brought here and there. Balanced druids were good because of Innovate for your arcane mage, 5% spell crit for your caster group, and 3% physical hit on the current target. Restoration gave their party members bonus healing and were just a pretty effective healer, and feral DPS were often just flexing between that and tanking depending on the fight, and I really didn't see that many people just stick to this purely as a DPS class. Either way, for the druid, they played out more or less how we expected them to the first time around, and whichever druid spec you want to play, there should be spots in the raid, but just know they aren't stacked. For mages,
yeah, Bear Druid is insane. I love Bear Druid. It's gonna pop the fuck off, easy time, but like with the issue with being a flex tank, you've got to take your pick. You don't get your pick of raid teams when you're pugging, right? Pugging is not the greatest experience as a tank because you can't really, like, you want to build a guild and a community. Like, in terms of dungeons, you'll always have a spot. People will be like begging you, hey, can you tank this Heroic for me, tank this Karazhan for me, this ZA for me. But in terms of like Sunwell, Black Temple, and like guilds that raids that matter, you're gonna want a guild, because anytime I've tanked before in the expansion while pugging, it's been a less than stellar experience, because the healers you find, the DPS you find, it's like you become elite and sweaty looking for the right people to be in your pug team. It's always funner to tank in a guild than it is to tank as a pug.
They are expected to start as Arcane and then go fire later on into Tier 6 and the Sunwell. In reality, Arcane could be the best mage spec for the whole expansion, and Arcane also peaks super hard in Tier 5. We can see from logs back towards the end of TBC though that both Fire and Arcane certainly had their moments. I'd hedge your bet that really good Fire Mage logs needed a lot more RNG on their side from crit, whereas Arcane's performance is more certain due to you knowing how much mana you're gonna need over the course of a fight, and you'll have people pre-assigned to give you that mana, such as Innovate and Mana Tide. Mages are definitely good, but not super stackable as Arcane because they need these extra sources of mana to do well. If you aren't getting Innovate, Tide, or even a Shadow Priest, you're going to be spending a way higher percentage of a fight casting Frostbolt in mana recovery mode, and to be honest, if you're doing that, you might as well just go Fire and press Fireball and hope you get lucky. Mages are
With Mage, same thing as usual, like Warlock and Hunter, or with Warrior, you gotta stack, have the right composition, or you just gotta play to the best of your ability. Mage is gonna be one of those top classes the whole expansion. I expect all the DPS meters to be topped by, like, for example, one Orlando, seeing like one Warrior or one Rogue in like the top 100. Maybe 2 or 3 warriors, a shit ton of hunters, a shit ton of warlocks, and a shit ton of mages. I expect to see the occasional, like, elemental or something like the top 200, 300. But for the most part, I expect the top 100 to be primarily those 3 classes and nothing else. Well, not counting like the occasional warrior rogue.
a fun spec though, and it definitely felt as though you were blasting when you're in tier 5 with the 2 set and Serpent Coil Braid. They also pack 2 good PvE specs, and Frost is also solid in PvP with dual spec. But for Mage, depending on how tryhard your guild is, it may just be Arcane all the way again. For Priest, I think it's another class where it performed basically as though we expect.
Every single raid team is going to need 1 or 2 Shadow Priests. The utility is insane. You are guaranteed a raid spot as a Shadow Priest, especially when pugging. Every pug's gonna be trying to grabbing a Shadow Priest. The issue is if a lot of people run Shadow Priest, especially now that we have dual spec, it's gonna be harder and harder. So you do have to keep in mind that when you are doing this, it's going to be somewhat difficult in a pug life, maybe. It just, again, depends on popularity for Shadow Priest. In a regular guild, they're gonna want a minimum of 1. But depending on the composition, at least 2, because of the mana battery and what they bring to your raid team.
it too. If I had to comment on one thing, it's probably the supply of Shadow Priests may outstrip the demand a little bit. Of course, you absolutely need one Shadow Priest per raid. Vampiric Touch is going to give your other healers loads of mana back, as well as your Arcane Mage, and you put up Shadow Weaving for Warlocks. You may see some guilds run a second Shadow Priest because they have one, but you don't really need to. On top of that, they do start okay in tier 4 in terms of damage, but wow, this class just falls off a cliff in terms of how well they do on the meters. This is because their spells kind of don't scale with anything apart from spell power. They don't really benefit from haste or crit scaling. On top of that, you have the minor annoyance of a 24-yard maximum range Mind Flay, which I've never been a fan of personally. It's a very selfless spec, and people will want them, but they'll just tend to want one of them. For Shadow Priest, I think almost a bit counterintuitive.
I will say that they're probably going to do some fixes to Shadow Priest. Yeah, I could actually absolutely expect them to tweak their range a bit. The issue is they're so good in PvP that it's kind of difficult to like really balance them for PvE without breaking the PvP side of it. Like Shadow Priest is really, really good. Like, you'll see them in a shit ton of arenas.
Intuitively, you want to find a guild with this and have a static group, because people just aren't going to be looking to invite tons of them to their raid. Next we have the Warlock, and as you'll know, Warlock had this fire or shadow spec identity in TBC, but honestly, I can tell you, it's all about the shadow spec. Fire was actually decent early on, but it's got several kind of enormous problems. First of all, it needs a fire mage to put up improved Scorch, and as we've already talked about, your mages probably aren't going to be playing fire, especially not at the start of the expansion. Second is the meta demonic sacrifice build forces you to choose which pet you're sacrificing. Imps will give you a fire buff, succubus shadow buff, you can't have both. And when you have this shadow buff, that's going to affect Seed of Corruption, which is your huge new AoE spell. Whereas your fire spells for AoE are, to be honest, absolutely terrible. They still don't crit. Seed of Corruption can crit. You don't really need to say much more than that. Shadow also has improved Shadow Bolt, which makes Shadow Bolt crits apply a 20% shadow damage taken debuff, so when you have multiple locks that are all shadow spec, it makes all of them scale off of one another, and it's kind of griefing the other warlocks not to be playing shadow. You should.
This is going to be such insane DPS. Like, in terms of like AoE, just watching Seed of Corruption go off, you'll see packs die and you're sitting there dick in your hand because you can't do shit compared to what these warlocks are capable of doing. It's gonna be really fun to play a warlock. It's not gonna be so much fun to not be a warlock.
No, however, the one button rotation meme is 100% true on the lock. If you see one bad guy with a red bar in front of you, you press Shadow Bolt. If you see multiple bad guys with red bars in front of you, you press Seed of Corruption. And that's it. The spec is very easy to play. The biggest skill on this easy class, however, is threat management. If the game decides your Shadow Bolt is critting, tanks will just not be able to keep up. Of course you have Soul Shatter to reset your threat, but A, it can be resisted, and B, it has a long cooldown. You're getting one of those per fight, if that. A final few random things now going into TBC Anniversary. So during TBC Classic, there was a meta where using Gnomish Battle Chicken could be procced before a fight started, giving everyone in your party a 5% haste buff, which could be stacked if multiple were procced. Back then you had to equip the chicken, find a weak enemy, hit the weak enemy, have them hit you back, and it would proc. That's just how people found out that it worked. Towards the end of TBC, Blizzard fixed this interaction by mistake by bug fixing something else on Illidan. Don't ask me how, they just did. Anyway,
this is probably going to stay fixed coming into TBC Anniversary. I don't see them enabling Gnomish Battle Chicken from the beginning anymore. I think this is not gonna work.
It's on Vanilla Anniversary right now. People are using Battle Chicken again and have found ways for it to proc. So I'm wondering when we do get to TBC, whether this meta will still be alive, or whether Blizzard are going to inadvertently bug fix it once again. Speaking of the Illidan encounter, I wanted to talk about that for a moment as well, because heading into Black Temple, it's definitely one of World of Warcraft's more epic raids. But depending on how tryhard your guild was, Illidan was, he was a bit disappointing, if I'm honest. His most iconic demon form phase could be easily skipped if you just held all cooldowns, used Bloodlust, used your potions and everything, and blasted through it. He would go into the animation to go in demon form, sort of stand there for a while, turn back into his normal form, and then you just finish the fight. It was a bit of a letdown that we never saw this, and I'm wondering if similar to Ragnaros, where you're forced to see the Submerge phase now, whether you should be forced to see the demon phase of Illidan. It would make the fight more difficult. This is absolutely the hardest phase.
I think they're not gonna touch this. The player base is just more skilled, the player base is just sweatier, more competent, has way more abilities and ways to play the game, way more ways to understand mechanics and systems, that I feel like if they buff Illidan, they're gonna make the game slightly unfun. And I feel like they've noticed that the player base in general just wants easy raids and easy content. So we're gonna go with post-nerf raids, post-nerf dungeons, yada yada yada. I just don't see them making this a harder experience. I get where Willie's coming from. I just personally don't see this being a harder, sweatier, more difficult experience. I think this is gonna stay as is. And in my opinion, honestly, that's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's perfectly fine. I think it's what it is. As cool as this phase is, it's not gonna be a change. I could see them giving a health buff, like a 15% increased health to Illidan, but that's just gonna punish casual guilds, and sweaty guilds are still gonna be just fine. So they're not really gonna change this because casual guilds are still gonna see this. This isn't stopping casual guilds.
To the fight, by the way, and it makes it way easier to wipe on this encounter, but at the same time it's something iconic that, due to how good we are at the game now, we're just not experiencing. Let me know what you think on this. Next point is scrolls. Make sure when you're playing TBC you are not vendoring or just using scrolls. So as you'll know, all consumables are converted into Guardian or Battle Elixirs in TBC, and most people will always flask outside of a few certain specs or using Elixir of Demon Slaying. Now people never use scrolls in vanilla because they didn't stack with things you already had, such as agility not stacking with Mongoose for example. But in TBC, scrolls do not count as either a Guardian or Battle Elixir, so people in more tryhard guilds will want to buy scrolls as a raid consumable. TBC introduces new scrolls. The highest one is rank 5, which can give up to 20 in an offensive stat, and there's also rank 4 that gives plus 17. The rank 5 scrolls should go for a good amount of gold, and even the rank 4 ones should be able to go on the auction house as well and see.
Yeah, I mean, you typically use your battle and guardian, and then your raid buffs, and then a scroll or two. So it's not like a lot of consume, so it's not super big deal. But like, yeah, just save the tier 4 ones you have now in Anniversary, and buy the 5s when you get them on the auction house, or if you just have them, just don't sell them. But it's worth having for raids.
A good price. So all in all, just make sure you're not throwing away the scrolls you get in TBC. Hang on to them, send them to your bank alt, or use them yourself, whatever you prefer. And the last thing to consider is how will Blizzard approach the alt and friendliness of TBC this time around, assuming we are on an accelerated cadence and will be.
So if we're on accelerated cadence, that means 12 months of TBC. 12 months of TBC, they would have to give reputation tablets for your alts, where, you know, you get 200-300% reputation. They would have to add systems, XP buffs. I don't know if TBC is 12 months, that'd be too much. I'm expecting like a 16 to 18 month TBC. Maybe a 15-month TBC, but if it's 11 or 12 months, I just think that's way too short. But 11 or 12 months of TBC would be hella fun to keep everybody busy and excited in the wait till BlizzCon next year for the Classic Plus announcement. So, I mean, not necessarily the worst thing. Definitely not, from being real. Like, it's not ideal for an 11-month TBC. But a 15 or 18-month or 21-month TBC would be too long, especially if they're announcing or launching Classic Plus later on at BlizzCon and things like that. If they do 18 months and TBC comes out, say, December or January, that would mean that TBC Anniversary would go all the way until around August 2027. And that's a long, long time for TBC. Especially if Classic Plus is like coming out 6 months before that, it'll kill the game anyways. I expect there to be a 15-month TBC total. I expect TBC Anniversary will be done in 15 months at max. I expect it'll be about 12 months. 12 to 15 months is, I feel, the ideal time frame of TBC. I don't feel like it's going to be longer than that at all.
progressing through the expansion a little bit faster than last time, which we probably will be looking at how Anniversary's gone so far. The keys for heroic dungeons at the start of TBC required Revered to obtain, and this was something that absolutely everyone had to do in order to attune to raids. These were dropped to Honored in a later patch, and what people are wondering is, will they be dropped to Honored at a slightly earlier phase of the game so more people can get ready on more alts? On top,
it's probably going to be Honored at launch. It'll probably be Honored, and then by phase 2 they'll probably drop it to Friendly. Like, they're not going to keep people like gatekeep these keys and these attunements very long.
For that, of course, there's the everlasting question of attunements in TBC. Again, I think it's something that everyone should have to experience on their main, but once you've done it, it's just not really that engaging to.
In regards to attunements, I also see them nerfing the shit out of attunements, kind of like Oni necks in the Oni neck from Season Discovery, where you could mail it to your alt and stuff like that. I feel like once you finish it on your main, they'll give you an item called Key to the Raids or something, and you just mail that to your alt, buying an account item that unlocks all the raids, so you don't actually have to farm them on your alt as well.
Everyone should have to experience on their main, but once you've done it, it's just not really that engaging to have to go back and do the same steps on your alt all over again when you just want to get into raiding. Players in general are a lot more endgame focused and goal driven now, and I think on a re-release of TBC you're gonna see this attitude even more so than normal. Either way, with the heroic key requirements and attunements, I can see them staying the same briefly at the start of the expansion, but I don't think Blizzard should wait too long before nerfing both to make the game a bit more accessible for players' alts. And those are all my thoughts on how TBC may be a little bit different this second time around, seeing it re-released in a classic capacity. Thank you once again to boot.dev for supporting the channel. Their courses are free to view, so if you're interested, why not check them out via the links below. Let me know what you think, and is there anything else which is going to be dramatically different from how the game was the first time around for you? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.
So, a good video by Willy. There'll be a link to the video in the description down below. Go subscribe to him if you haven't already. Go, leave a like, comment on the video, watch the whole thing over there on his channel as well. Great video by Willy. He's probably the most reacted to classic creator, not counting Bellula's not a classic creator. Probably the most reacted to WoW creator, not counting Bellula. But in regards to other changes, I expect there to be a lot of balance changes, tweaks, class balancing, like tweaks here or there, pacing things, attunement changes, PvP changes. I expect them to really go ham with TBC Anniversary, and I expect them to leave a TBC era server at the end of it. I think TBC Anniversary as it is going to be an experiment to see the level of changes that the player base will be happy with. With Anniversary, people didn't want any changes. With TBC, I expect it to be a solid amount of changes. I don't know if it's going to get a shit ton of changes. It's definitely not going to be mop level, but they're definitely going to tweak and shift things around to make TBC a more, quotation marks, enjoyable experience than what it is right now in the current moment, right? Now, don't quote me on that fully. They might do 0 changes, but I personally believe that we are getting changes, and I just don't see a universe in which Blizzard doesn't implement a hefty amount. So for a lot of people, for a lot of TBC old heads who want original organic TBC, we're probably not getting that. And I'm okay with that. I'm not saying this is the perfect version of TBC. I'm just saying it's a decent version, all things considered. I'm looking forward to what they've got in mind. What other quality of life changes, shifts, and things they plan on implementing.